What are your night shift horror stories? I was working the Christmas Eve night shift in my local emergency department. The clock struck 4 AM on Christmas morning and the emergency buzzer sounded. A 74-year-old male patient had gone into a sudden cardiac arrest. The buzzer wasn't working properly, so we couldn't locate where exactly in the department it was coming from. Once we finally figured it out, we got in there and I took over chest compressions. A team of anesthetists, nurses, doctors, and 20 minutes later, we managed to get him back for just long enough for his family to come and say goodbye to him. What a crappy Christmas. Night shift RN on a covered unit. Had a code 5 AM Christmas morning and did not get him back, unfortunately. Imagine waking up Christmas morning to a call that your father had died. I went home and cried. Used to work night shift at a middle school. Every night while cleaning out the boys' locker room I would hear at least one locker slam shut, sometimes more. This creeped me out when I started, but after a couple of months I got used to it. One night while cleaning one of the girls' locker room, I heard a girl scream. I walked out of the locker room, even looked outside the building, didn't see anybody. Before that I worked at the high school. I'd randomly hear doors open and close. Nowadays I work day shift at another school. About a year ago I just got to the building to begin my shift. It was still dark out and I was turning on all the lights. When I walked by the main office I heard what sounded like someone ransacking the place. Papers being tossed. I heard what sounded like a table or file cabinet being dragged. I remember my first thought was, man, somebody must have lost something important. Then I clicked. It was 6 in the morning and it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas break, meaning there was no school and there shouldn't be anybody in there. Took me a second to work up the courage to go in and check it out. When I did, nobody was there and nothing was out of place. Finally, last month I get a call from dispatch at 3 AM. The fire alarm was going off and they needed somebody to go turn it off. As soon as I walk in I freak out. The alarm is blaring, but what scared me was the strobe light that flashes with the alarm. The building was pitch black except every other second when that strobe lit the halls up. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie where they're looking for the killer. I was half expecting to see someone pop up out of nowhere when the halls lit up. Schools after hours are some of the creepiest places. Honestly, up there with dark graveyards and hospitals for me. Working third shift security at a condo, and a mother left the bathroom to check on their mac and cheese. Her 2-year-old drowned in the tub. Once the police were done, my boss called me and told me I had to go talk to the family and find out what happened, even though we knew from the police telling us. My daughter was about 2 at the time. It broke my heart to even hear the story from the guy I relieved, and then I had to go ask the family to tell some doomus rent-a-cop about it as well. This is the worst one. For a change of pace, here's a nice one. I was taking my break outside and a little mouse came up to me, so I gave him a bit of pot noodle and he sat on the floor next to me munching away on it. Had a squirrel do that. I was in a bad mood and this squirrel comes up to me holding an orange peel and holds it out so I can take it. Took the orange peel and he ran away. Put a smile on my face and my bad mood was over. So we were doing an overnight refit of my department store, 3 stores for the selling floor and another 3 stores unused. To save on cost they'd just employ the normal day staff, but overnight. It's a proper building in the CBD. No way in, only out when locked. Basically bunch of uni students working 9 PM to 5 AM for that sweet overtime. Store was completely empty except for us and a few tradesmen on different floors. Welp, something kept setting off the alarms on the top floors. The floors are pitch black as they are unused and you know it's night shift. Night manager thinks it's an errant tradesman. Trade supervisor thinks it's one of us. Alarms get reset 3 or 4 times. It's pee off the big manager because he gets called when the alarms go off. So we all are sent out of the building. Head count taken. Freaking alarms go off again. Right? Night manager troops us all back in and goes into the comms room. Brings up all the cameras. Goes back in the footage. Convinced one of us is dicking around. Can't see anything. Nothing. Except then a shadow moving. Backlight by the faint light of the smoke detector. It moves out of frame. Well, now we have a shadow monster in our sealed building above us. Tradesman troop us the stairs, tools in hand. Manager unlocks the stairwell door. The only way onto the floor, throws the lights on. Nothing there. Lights off. Door locked. Repeats this on the other floors working up. Nothing there. Spooked but proven nothing is there. We go back to work. Alarms go off. This brave tradesman says I'll hide upstairs and catch it. We let him. We are all waiting in the stairwell. After 20 minutes we hear screaming and the alarms going off. Tradesman yelling, "What you doing, you freaking see?" We all burst into the room like the Scooby Gang as a homeless man Olympic flips himself into the HIVOC system. Apparently we had the Olympic athlete of homeless people living in our HIVOC system and our overnight shifts disturbed him. Night manager got the police to deal with it. Since this department store was in retrofitted old building, there was actually a fair bit of room between the floors on the upper levels. Homeless maid made a swag between them, moved between them by army crawling the big vents, which also explained why the system was freaking useless. Definitely an Australian tradesman. What an excellent time to read this. At 2:42 am, completely alone in the 8th floor of the building because I'm the only person in the night shift. Solidarity from a lone overnight hotel worker alone at 4:14 am. These threads always show up when I'm alone at the hotel in the middle of the night, and yet I read them anyway. Not night shift exactly, but I get off work later than the average person and have a 2-hour bus train ride home. You see some weird people at bus stops late at night. I could give a lot of random stories of weird, funny, or scary things that have happened, but this one stuck with me. This one still bothers me when I think about it. It was this dude talking to someone on the phone. He had a hood on so I couldn't actually see the phone, but I figured it was a phone since he was pausing for a response every so often. Generally people who are just rambling to nobody don't take those pauses. So he's ranting about how the Constitution is a universal law, and the amendments weren't hammered in enough to support it correctly, and how when you take vitamins you sweat toxins out of your feet after. He even paused during his explanation of how that worked and clarified something he'd mentioned. Normal level of crazy for a phone conversation, nothing too weird. But then he started saying something like, "I'll write it out as best I can remember." Just describing it wouldn't work. So, this is how I talk to myself. This is how I talk to myself, and I talk to myself all the time, because I have to. Because that's the only way to realize the truth. Everything they ever told you is a lie, and you've got to talk to yourself to stop being indoctrinated. You know, the teachers all said, "Be cool, stay in school," and they wouldn't lie to you. You think your teacher wouldn't lie to you, but then you get addicted to drugs. Then you're a loser. Then you're not cool anymore. Then you're shooting up under a tree and it's the only little happiness you get. Shooting up under a tree. And you go still high, that stuff still going through your veins to figure out your whole life philosophy. Then you're a loser. You're a loser. You're 32 and you lose your kids. He was starting to cry at that point. I guess he didn't have anyone on the phone with him after all. It was my stop then, and it's not a good idea to engage with obviously unstable drug addicts regardless. So I just got up and left. But that still bothers me. I work at a hotel in the middle of city and I was on the overnight front desk shift when me and my valet at the time realized there was a man in one of the guest rooms that was prior occupied. We called the police and found that the guests upstairs hog-tied him, so he was escorted out. Nothing too crazy. Stuff like that happens all the time in a hotel like this. But we had the 3 lowest floors of the hotel shut down due to low occupancy during COVID-19. We soon discovered he was caught in the guest's room after trying to open every door from the floor up, seeing if it was unlocked or propped open slightly. He was staying in one of our vacant rooms on the low floor unknown to us for a week, stealing food from the mini bar and banquet halls. We watched him on the security cameras on the lower floors walking around the halls every night butt naked and videoing himself. My nightmare came from my partner doing night shift. He was swapping from days to nights constantly with only a day to try and adjust his sleep cycle in between mining. It took the biggest toll on his well-being to the point he was telling me he was just going to run his car off the road on his way to his next swing. He could barely string a sentence together. Messing with your circadian rhythm is no joke. I can only imagine how many years he's shaved off his life in the long run. I was a night shift team lead at a homeless shelter. I have too many horror stories, but a standout is when one of the clients died. When we found her, she had been dead for several hours. We still attempted CPR, Very unsettling and traumatizing experience, not only for the interaction with a dead body but also just knowing she died on the floor in this warehouse and that several of us had likely walked by her while she was dead. Sorry that happened to you. It's an unsettling experience for sure. I was working night shift and also found a body of a young man who overdosed. Protocol is to attempt CPR, despite the fact that they were in rigor and the body was cold and solid. Pretty traumatizing. I've seen death plenty of times in my line of work, but something about that always stuck with me. On patrol while people still working in the building, a woman saw me and freaked out, running away. She complained to the site manager that she saw a man at night. Got fired. First day on the job. I was like, seriously? Night shift nurse. Picked up the phone about 2 AM. Don't panic, but recognized it as one of the C-suite's voices. I was immediately worried. There's an electrical issue in the something another closet. There's a chance it may explode. You need to evacuate all patients from the area. Just me and one other nurse with 5 moms, their 5 babies, and however many visitors. We quickly jumped into our own little panic-driven task force. We had packed up enough diapers, wipes, formula, water, snacks, and blankets to be evacuated for a week. LOL. Happy to report it didn't explode and all was back to normal by 7 AM day shift. There's plenty of horror stories from creepy things happening, or just not having enough staff during bad deliveries, but this one has always stood out in my memory. Security officer here. Posted one night to an old site that apparently was a hospital being turned into a rest home, with no power on site. All I had was my flashlight and laptop to watch movies cause it was a 12-hour watch. Place was massive and at night you literally can't see frick all. Anyways, the company had put up a temporary security camera that every time it picks up motion, the fucking thing sends off a loud siren sound for about 30 seconds. First time that thing went off I went to investigate with emergency service on speed dial and goosebumps flaring. I wouldn't seem to find what was causing it to go off. It then would go off a couple more times into the night. It got to the point where I would just let it do its thing. But every time it went off it would send shivers down my spine. When we do our handover with the next guard I would tell him all the time how the siren just goes off at night all the time. I haven't been back in a while, but man I still think about that place till this day. It scares me. It's interesting what those cameras will consider as movement. I've spaced out looking at the cameras at work, and sometimes notice the movement icon pop up when literally nothing I can see is moving. I'm a warehouse security guard in Indiana. I started on midnights and have since moved to 2NDS. It was around 4 AM and I was in the exterior part of my perimeter tour, and since no one was there I was singing a song. Just something I like to do while I'm alone. I picked up the habit in scouts when we would go on hikes, so I'm outside. It's maybe a 100-foot walk to the door I'm supposed to re-enter the warehouse with. I hear footsteps and an awful voice singing the same song behind me. I whip around and this dude who's basically emaciated, his eyes are bulging, and he's got a bunch of pock marks on his face is walking behind me. I crap you not. My butthole was so tightly puckered I could have sucked in a bicycle. Some freaking M or crack addict had snuck up on me and he was less than 15 feet away. I asked him who he was and why he was here. He didn't respond and just kinda watched me. I told him this is private property and is closed at this time. He needs to leave now or I'm calling the police. He looks around, scratches his arms a bit and turns and walks away, looking back occasionally. He finally left property and when I was absolutely sure he was gone I bolted into the door. Scariest night I've had working there. If he hadn't started singing he could have done whatever he wanted to me. I have tinnitus and sometimes I hear noises that aren't actually there. When I hear footsteps nowadays I typically just chalk it up to I'm hearing a faint echo, because that's what it typically always is. Now whenever I hear anything I'll look to see what it was. I told my supervisor in the morning that I had to kick a person off property cause they were loitering after hours. Supervisor just kinda told me that stuff like that happens and it's fairly normal this close to the edge of inner Indy. Worked as a security guard, did a week-long gig working from 6 PM to 2 AM during setup and the 3 days of the concert itself. First had a plague of locusts during setup. Then on the second night of the concert, one of my supervisors got targeted by a drunk patron who he kicked out earlier. The guy punched him so hard knocked his orbital socket loose. Finally on the third night, just when I thought things were calming down, we had the worst mass shooting in US history take place. I had to keep 6 people from bleeding out till cops arrived in my area backstage about an hour and a half later. My buddy and I were in the guard shack on an important entry point, like 100% it checks, can't be expired, gotta double check against a list put out even if the IDs are valid, so if you're not on the list it doesn't mean crap. It's around 3 AM and we're watching creepy YouTube videos during the time that nobody is coming through. He looks up and shouts, "What the frick?" I look up and scream like a little girl and nearly jump out of my chair. Dollar store Jason Momoa was just face pressed against the glass, grinning, and once he scared the crap out of us he laughed and walked in. Dude was as big as Jason Momoa and pretty similar looking. I mean dollar store version of him. 10 minutes later after we calmed down I looked at him and asked, wait, did he even show an ID? No he did not, LMAO. Y'all were not particularly good guards. 2 people on night shift in a shipyard that employed a few hundred. Big empty ships all around. Looks pretty Scooby-Doo. Go down to the shop to the vending machine and definitely hear a person outside. Long route to get out there and can't find them. Tear around the property for half an hour. Figure out it was probably a drunk crew member staying on one of the ships. Their night watch guy covered for him, I'm positive. Forget about it. Then go to clean the bathrooms at like 3 in the morning. The women's room was on the other side of the wall from the vending machine, where I originally heard him. Sucker puke like 12 square feet on the bathroom floor. Didn't have the proper tools, so it was like cleaning an entire room floor of spaghetti with a spatula, but the spaghetti is actually drunk sailor vomit. I worked at a high-rise residential overnight for a few years. I became very familiar with residents' habits schedules. People that were rich, either by their own means or living out of daddy's wallet. But to my surprise, they were all among the most miserable people I have ever encountered. I actually left the job because I couldn't stand how unhappy and self-destructive they all were. One guy in particular, I would see every night, shuffling around the property, high as heck. He was retired doctor. I never saw him sober. The times I worked in the day, I'd never see him come out. Unlike other residents who went out and got high or drunk and brought the party inside, he never came back with friends or even family. He kept to himself, even chose the entranceway that avoided interacting with me. One night, a man and woman check in to visit a resident. They tell me they are seeing the retired doctor. I call the guide to let him know that he has visitors, because that was protocol to avoid letting someone inside the building who wasn't supposed to be there. Even people who I knew were friends with or dating the resident still had to get permission from the resident. Well, there's no answer on the phone, so I tell the visitors I can't let them up. The visitors exchange looks, and the man speaks up. Of course he can't come to the phone. He just shot himself to death 15 minutes ago. The bit that disturbs me is how, apparently, they nonchalantly wandered up to you requesting to go see the doctor. If that was my friend, I would have 1. Phoned an ambulance, police, and 2. Afterwards ran in literally telling you to let me in because my friend is attempting suicide. As a former Walmart graveyard worker, I can attest to the absolute weirdest people coming out at night. I'm not sure what it is about 12:03 AM, but that's definitely the sweet spot. The weirdest thing that would happen at mine was that periodically, a man, or should I say a typical Walmart brand tweaker, would come in, you know, tall, white, bald, weird, dirty sweatsuit type pants shirt, and he wore a backpack. So first time you saw him you were thinking of course he's gonna steal crap, and he did, a lot actually, but that's because he was the fastest tweaker alive. The man had to have mapped the store out, because he was in and out of departments like he had an underground route. He'd stroll right in, someone would see him and walk his location. He'd snatch whatever and simply vanish from hardware to suddenly appear in HBA. Then we'd run after him and he was gone again. It was honestly kind of creepy knowing that he could be around somewhere close, because he was always really messed up on M or something. You wouldn't know he left until you heard a fire exit go off. That's how we knew he was gone. It wasn't a one-time thing, it happened at least once a month. Same guy, same operation. Sometimes I miss that job, just for the absolute crazy stories like that. I was working night shift security at our local rundown shopping center, shopping mall for our American friends. There was 2 of us on shift. I'm in the control room and my mate is patrolling the malls. Suddenly the fire alarm goes off. The rule of thumb in this situation is, let it run its course and go into evacuation mode, which will send an alert to the local fire station and they'll come out and deal with it. What is worth noting at this point is, it's Saturday night, Sunday morning, just after 2 AM. Lots of nightclubs in the vicinity, and when the alarm goes into evacuation mode, all the doors automatically open. Cue the shopping center quickly receiving nearly 100 drunken, high club goers. I see this on camera, radio my mate and tell him to haul butt down to the control room. It didn't take long for our new guests to start trashing the place. I silenced the alarm, phoned the police and made regular announcements over the PA system that the police were en route. I called my boss to inform him of the situation. All he said was to call the police. No duh, done that already. Fire brigade arrived first. I let them into the control room but wouldn't let them into the public areas as it was too dangerous for them, nor the service areas as some of the trespassers had found their way in. Police arrived but they wouldn't go in as they needed backup. 2 cops and approx 100 people. I don't blame them. When backup arrived they then swept through the shopping center section by section with the other security guard on hand to lock up as they went. Then they had to go through the service corridors bit by bit to find the others. There was only about 7 of them. Just as they were found and being escorted off-site, my boss, the head of maintenance and the operations manager for the shopping center arrived. I was reprimanded for letting it go into evac mode, despite me showing in black and white in print, to let it run its course. Head of maintenance backed me up saying I followed procedure. The other guard was reprimanded for abandoning his post. We took that one to our area manager and challenged. Thankfully she took our side. 1 mall cop versus 100 violent drunks. Dang right he abandoned his post. Night 1. Caught hobo jerking off in dumpster corral. Night 2. Junkie came speeding in one entrance while I was cleaning the parking lot. Threw out a handful of loose used syringes and peeled out the other entrance without slowing down. Worked that job for like 5 years. I was doing a night shift at a bodega in Brooklyn, and this homeless lady comes running and yelling and crying. She went to the beer section and broke the window with something. I went to go check it out, and she was hysterically crying, using a shard of glass to cut her wrist open. Not just clean cuts, but like gouging it open. Blood all over her shirt. No clue how she broke the window. There was a hospital literally a block and a half down. In the moment I saw her with blood streaming down her wrist, I just sort of manhandled her over my shoulder and ran to the hospital with her on me. She was crying and screaming and hitting me with her other arm. These guys who hang out on the block saw me run down the block with a tiny, screaming, bleeding woman over my shoulder, and they jolted after me thinking I was kidnapping her. They caught up to me and tackled me and she fell to the ground, and they threw me against a wall and kept asking me what the frick I was doing, and I said I was taking her to the hospital, and they all quickly realized what was going on and got her up into the hospital. The whole ordeal happened in like the span of maybe 150-200 seconds. I had a concussion from when they knocked me to the floor. She survived apparently, no clue besides that. I think I may have told this story somewhere else but I can't remember. I worked night shift at a small hotel in a small town in Utah. Every so often, some guy would call us and ask questions about booking a room but would never actually go through with it. One night, he calls in again and I'm entertaining his questions. He asks about rooms and rates, things to do around town, and where we're located. Then he starts asking personal questions like where I'm from, if I'm Mormon, and if I was alone. He then asked if I was standing up, which freaked me out because I was, and I was sure he was somehow watching me. Looking back, it would make sense that I was standing behind the desk on the phone, but my sleep-deprived brain didn't make that connection until later. I told him to stop calling and hung up the phone. Then I went to the back room and cried. I called my then boyfriend, now husband, and he talked to me while I calmed down. When I think about it now, it was probably some guy high or drunk and thought it would be funny to mess with someone. It was so freaky, especially since I was alone, tired, and couldn't think straight. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.